Good afternoon, everyone. It's Anifa Menon from hearthealthbrainhealth.com, encouraging healthy grieving and mindful actions. Today, I wanted to talk to you about a story that's actually very well known in Hinduism. And some of you might know that Bali is very Hindu focused. And I can tell you that even though I have not been brought up through Hindu tradition or religion, I certainly do feel that there's such a similarity of this story as to stories that you might hear through your own traditions. You might notice it is something similar in Christianity, in Islam. It's similar in different fairy tales, even, we might say. So it's about this whole idea of good over evil, and of course we all know about these, and of course movies are made about these things, but Ramayana is actually quite central here in Bali. What's interesting is the reason I'm actually even making this video today is because I was reflecting on the fact that I'm right across from a temple, and it's called the Purudalam Temple, and this is the Temple of Death. And it's interesting that I've learned that there's a lot of people that would not even want to visit this temple because there's such a fear of death. And if you look at the images in this temple, so all of the statues are quite aggressive and scary, fear-inducing, difficult. It's not easy. And yet if we know about our lives, everyone has not easy times, has scary times, and it's also something that we all carry. So when we look at this Ramayana story, again, I do know that in many traditions, and I might even chance to say all traditions, and again, even if we just look at just, fairy tales growing up and this whole idea of good over evil, this is kind of what a lot of people gather from Ramayana. Now I find that whether in Bali or elsewhere, there's not really an understanding of this story. Now listen to that, the birds understand. And so they're happy that I'm sharing this with you, and I'm happy to be sharing it with you. I'm going to tell you that this video is going to be about a simple understanding of Ramayana, and yet this simple understanding will tell you the depth of this, which you will probably be able to relate to your own life experience, no matter which traditions you've grown up with, and no matter which ideas have filtered in your mind, because you'll see that this actually reflects every single one of us. So it says here, the Ramayana speaks of the true identity of the individual, the real significance of the family, and the sanctity of the society. The Ramayana teaches the importance of human values. Today, corruption is rampant in all fields such as business, education, and politics. And it doesn't stop at these three fields. It actually is infiltrating and is rampant in everything. So whether we look at government level, we look at healthcare, we look at business, and all of this is definitely filled with corruption today. And it's not only today, this has happened in cycles throughout history, but today I want to draw our attention to this and recognize that, again, this Ramayana story is something that actually relates to all of us. Now, even the people who have grown up with these stories do not necessarily understand the significance of how this relates to our experience today. So a lot of people would know some details about these two main characters, which are Rama and Sita, that are in this story, but many do not understand the significance for us today. And so today I thought I'd read this awareness, this reading about the Ramayana, to you to have an idea of what it was about. So it says, Hindus believe that a great warrior prince called Rama once existed who was married to a beautiful, strong woman called Sita. They were living a happy, peaceful life until the terrible demon king, Ravana, started causing trouble. He lived nearby and yearned to marry Sita himself. Now this is interesting. This is, one could say that sometimes when people have read this story, they think of it like this beautiful love story, that wow, how awesome is that, that here's this man who's so in love with this beautiful woman, and she's, remember, a very strong, she's also a courageous, she's a very disciplined woman, and he's so in love with her that someone else got jealous and wanted to have what he had. That's Ravana wanted to have Sita. And then this is her journey of recognizing that, oh my goodness, I need to call out for Rama, which again, when we think of Rama is like this godlike property, this godlike ability, this God within each of us. And this idea, she's calling out to, some might say a lover, she might say a husband, she might say a friend. And the truth is, it's about divine energy. So this divine energy that she calls to her saves her, and had already told her before he had left to do his work that she has these qualities, that she's protected because of these qualities. And as soon as Ravana had an opportunity to try to influence her and to try to get her attention, she was centered for some length of time, and then eventually she broke her own, we'll say, standards. She broke her own virtues and decided that this was something truth that was being told to her. Now, she already knew that Ravana was not a good energy, yet he was able to convince her by using various, we'll say, deceitful tactics to convince her that he was all the things that she would wish for. And so she went outside of her circle of understanding herself and what is right and virtuous. And what happened was when she did that, she actually wasn't happy with the outcome. She was so disappointed in herself, and also not happy as she realized that she'd been deceived, she had been lied to, she had been taken. She was a fool, just what she felt like, because all of this knowledge she already knew. So this tells us that we can have knowledge, we can read about things, we can actually understand it. But unless we're practicing from what we know, we don't put it into effect and see the benefits of it. And so I wanted to make sure that I share that this Ravana actually represents every single one of us. So does Sita, so does Rama. So if we think about this, it's known as, this story actually talks about this Ravana had 10 heads. And what would happen is every time Rama would try to chop off one head, a new head would grow. And so people would think that, oh wow, that must have been such a tough battle. What a demon, and so not easy. Yet, it was only when Rama hit right at the main body that Ravana fell and was definitely killed. So in this, when we think about this, these are the 10 heads of Ravana that many people do not fully understand. The 10 heads of Ravana are lust, anger, greed, attachment, ego, jealousy, hatred, deceit, stubbornness, and laziness. Now, how many of us have felt any of those things? Now, if you look at this particular situation, how many times have you looked at, whether it's your best friend or it could be a husband or a wife, that you're seeing that is a friend of yours, or that could even be your brother or sister who is in a fantastic relationship, and you start thinking, wow, I'd love to have that relationship. That person that they're with is so the person I would like to be with. And many, many, many go through this experience. And then what do? So when we act on this, we let go of our principles, we let go of our virtue, of that's someone else's relationship and I will not interfere in that. When we think about this, every single one of us feels all of these 10 heads of Ravana. Now what's interesting, that again, when we think of greed, we think of attachment, we think of jealousy, hatred, deceit, let's bring it back to all of the fields that this happens in. So this is the relationship field that I'm talking about at first. Recognize in business, let's say I own a store and I'm selling a product for a certain cost. And I know what my cost is. I know that when I sell this, I'm going to make just a slight amount and it will help me both pay for what I've sold, but also move ahead a little bit in my business. My neighbor is selling the exact same thing, but for $5 more. $5 more, and I go over and tell the neighbor that, this isn't right. I know how much that cost, and yet you're charging $5 more. And the person says, well, I can, and people will pay for it, and so they will. And you're the idiot for not selling it at a price that you're making more. And you see how this has happened in society, that we've seen it in everything. So when we look at small business that thinks this way, we can look in Bali or anywhere. We can look at hotels, we can look at restaurants, we can look at healthcare, we can look at anything, and price keeps going up, and people will say, well, the cost of living is getting higher, and it is. Yet the cost is not actually related to how the price of living is moving. So there's this exponential difference, and we can say that cost of living is rising exponentially too, Yet it's not truth in terms of this is what the cost is and this is what I'm charging. In terms of this, we know that we can look at an Apple phone, and I'm not picking on Apple, I'm just using it as an example. And we make excuses, right? So we will say that, wow, my phone only costs this much and yours costs that much, but you've got an Apple, so yeah, it makes sense. Does it make sense? No, it doesn't really make sense, but we give people or things or organizations or businesses that out. And we do this with ourselves too. And we give ourselves an out for anything that, well, since the neighbor is charging for $5 more and I don't want to lose a sale, I'm going to raise mine $5 too. And in fact, I'll raise it to $6 because I want to do just a little better than the other person. And this is what's created our world that we're seeing today. And again, this happens in every single field. And I'm going to include spirituality in this because when I look at this temple across the street, there's definitely people that are afraid to go to it because of the symbols and the statues that are there. It brings up all of this awareness of things that are not good and what our fears are. And when we think of this, remember that this is a place of contemplation, reflection, and connection with a higher divine energy. The higher divine energy has both good and not good. It comes right through us. And then it's our conscious awareness and our ability and our blessing that we actually get to choose which direction we want to go. And so we even look at spiritual places today. So whether we look at mosques, temples, we can look at synagogues, we can look at any place that is really designed to be a place of reverence for something bigger. And what happens at temples here, and I'm positive that this happens in churches and mosques and all sorts of different ways where we see a collection plate of, oh, if you're going to come here, then this collection plate is set aside and put out and maybe sent out, and people feel kind of guilty if they don't actually put something into a collection plate in a church. And then there's, you can anonymously donate to anything, but people aren't so anonymous about it, so they're being very noticeable that here I am donating something, but they also feel it themselves that I'm doing something really good, and yet they kind of want to be noticed. When we look at these temples here, when I look at them, I notice, and this has happened to me too, that you cannot get through the doors for many of the temples unless you buy a sarong. You rent a sarong. And I was wearing a sarong when I actually went to one of the temples that I went to, but it wasn't from them and it wasn't bought, and so I didn't pay my admission fee and I chose not to go there. And it's so interesting, I think, in this mind's perspective, this is about making a point about, it's not about the money. I would love to give, and I do give, to things for charity, but in this sort of space, I would like to have just that natural welcome to the space to remember divinity. Divinity is what is being forgotten in our day-to-day. And again, we all carry this. So I see this happening, and then I also know that shows happen at this temple for sure, and they're beautiful, beautiful shows. And guess what? It's about Ramayana. But are we talking about what we're learning about Ramayana and applying it, or are the people who are running the show actually more interested in, are there enough people that have come today? Have they paid their cover fee? Can we get more people in? This has become entertainment. And when it's become entertainment, we've lost so much that we're not recognizing that as a society, we're moving away from these really meaningful spaces of compassion, love, integrity, honesty, and moving away from these Ravana traits. And we can understand that each one of us has a role to play in this. And we can say, well, because they're doing it, we're doing it. So one temple can say that about another temple, then want to have all the bells and whistles of another temple. Or another person can do this. Well, I'll just create this show right here, and this is what I'm going to charge. And honestly, it's become very competitive and not very heart-centered. And all of us can be in that heart-centered space ourselves. So even if we go to a show like this, go with the intention to give to divine energy. Go with that intention that, yes, these people are putting on this show for my benefit, for me to understand something that's deeper. It's being held in a sacred spot, and each person is reflecting divinity through them. I'm also sharing from my divinity of generosity in this. This space is a beautiful space to work from. And again, for all of these Ravana ideas, remember that we all hold them, every one of us. And it's not to judge anyone else that, oh yeah, I noticed my best friend is doing that, or my friend is doing this, or I should say parent or child is doing this. It can happen for anyone. And of course, my competitor is doing this is the easiest one to notice, because I already have just a little bit of my back up about my competitor and less back up about friends and family. Recognizing this and recognizing whether you're doing this is the key to this whole story of Ramayana. Remembering that this is being taught to us from all sorts of traditions. It's not specific to Hinduism, but it is pervasive, and it is also something that every single one of us can learn from. Those are my quotations. I've read from some Ramayana details for you, and I hope that those are useful for you today. So rather than going for other quotations, these are the ones that I leave you with today. And please reflect on those 10 heads of Ravana and see, are you consciously able to pull away from those traits to come back to Rama and Sita? Remember, Sita is a very centered, strong, powerful woman, and beautiful. And Rama is a very strong, powerful, centered man. These don't reflect a man and a woman. They reflect the two energies right within each of us. So I have a Rama and I have a Sita with me. Sita is all of my wisdom. Rama is all of my action, which comes from honest, compassionate, loving, and helpful energies. And these, we all have all of it. And if we choose to focus on the Rama and Sita within us, we will build this energy around us. I wish you a fabulous day of contemplating that, and I hope you remember, transform your mind and transform your life. Have a great day, everyone.